Hi and welcome to my channel. My name is Big Jim Trucker. This is the first time that I'm doing a live, so I don't know if I can do it well, but I'm going to try. I mean, I've been doing trucking now for, I started driving in 1975. So, I started off hauling steel. Steel coils, matter of fact, was the first thing I started doing. And I was hauling in and out of the inland steel, running up to Ryerson up in Elk Grove Village. 3 loads a day. I was paid, trying to remember now because it's been a few years ago. I think I was making 32%. So at that time, I was making like $143 per load. And we used to do like 3 loads a day, and it was fun because I was young. I think I was 23 or something like that, and so go out to inland steel, get one steel coil, usually around 43,000 pounds. I had I think it was a 69 or 70. I don't remember exactly. 1969 Kenworth. It had power. It had air assist steering. It had a 10-speed with a 290 Cummins. Now remember, in 1975 when I was doing this, or 76, something like that, they didn't have power steering. There was no air conditioning, no cell phones, anything like that. So everything was payphone. You'd have to go to a payphone and dial an 800 number and talk to dispatch. And if you needed directions, you'd have to look up in the phone book. They had these things. They were beautiful things. It was called a phone book. Seriously, it was a phone book. You went to a phone booth, and on a wire thing there was this thick phone book. They had a white page and a yellow pages, but since I was a commercial driver, you used the yellow pages. So I would look up the company and try and find their 800 number, and I would call them and say, hey, dude, I got a coil from Inland Steel, and I'm trying to get directions to your company. And then they would give you directions over the phone. Sometimes it would have a thing to where hit number 6 for directions. And then you would get directions to their company like a recorded message, So, and then sometimes, at that time it was kind of cool. So, you would use a payphone. And then as time went on, things changed. And, instead of payphone, but that was later on. But so you had air assist steering, which is not power steering. What it was is there was a piston. And when you would turn the wheel this way here, the piston would push, and then it would help turn your wheels with using air pressure. So it was kind of easy when you turn a corner with that air, but the only thing is as you turn it, when you would take the tension back, you'd hear it go, so it would exhaust air pressure, which back in those days, you had to figure that you had a tank that held air in it, and the motor put the compressed air in. So the bad part is that when you'd get to a dock, and you'd be backing into the dock, and you're constantly steering, that thing's exhausting air pressure, so a lot of times you would run out of air as you were backing down into the dock. And sometimes your brakes would come on and you'd have to sit there. And in the wintertime it sucked because you'd have guys yelling, hey, asshole, pull your truck out. I can't. The brakes are locked up. I'll have my air in a minute because they got the door open. And a lot of them, the dock was, you were right in their company. So when they'd open that door, you'd back into the building. There was no inside doors to keep the air going through the whole factory. So you'd have those guys yelling at you, hey, Jim, get that damn thing in here or get out, one or the other. So you'd have to get down in the dock. You'd set your brakes and then stuff like that and unchain that coil, and the big overhead crane would come and pull that coil off your truck. So it was kind of cool. I mean, for me, it was exciting because I was probably in my 20s and stuff like that. Here I am, a young guy, and I'm hauling these huge, because on that 20-foot flatbed, that 43,000 pound coil was huge. So it looked huge. But it was fun, and you'd be driving down the road, and as you're going from inland to Elk Grove Village, I'd be on 294. Truckers, in case you don't know it, truckers look down at every car that comes next to you. We don't look down to see if we could see skirts and legs. We just look down. And sometimes we do see that, and we see other stuff. But I always look down, and you would see kids looking at the trailer, because with that big coil sitting on that trailer, it would be flexing as you're bouncing. So that center of that trailer would be flexing like this, and you'd have people looking at it and pointing at it, because it's a huge coil on that. I think it was 32 foot, and so it would be bouncing, and you would see kids looking up that big ass coil that you got on there. And I would go up to Elk Grove Village, and always there was a lot of trucks there. I mean, there was a lot of trucks at Ryerson. So you'd get there, and there'd be 10, 15 trucks ahead of you. But there were one coil, so a lot of times when you drive into the building, they just grab that coil off you real quick, set it down, and they would sign your bills, and you drive out. You wouldn't even be able to chain your load, chain down your stuff. They would tell you, the second I get that off, drive outside, chain outside. So even if you were picking up a coil that was, drop it on your truck, driver, pull out, tarp outside, chain outside, raining outside. They didn't care. You have to throw paper on it and then throw 3 chains through it and stuff like that. So it was a challenge. It's not like now. And the traffic was, back in them days, people drove like crazy. And here you are, percentage, going Elk Grove, then I'd have to deadhead back out to Inland Steel and get another load and get back out to Ryerson, and then always dispatch would say, you got one more round. Dude, I'm in Elk Grove. I don't care. Get back out there, they'll load you to midnight, and then you get back up in Elk Grove, and they would, I don't remember if they were 24/7 or I don't remember that. But I know that you'd have to get that third load, and then you'd run back up north and get that lifted off. I think you had a certain deadline before midnight or something. I don't remember exactly. But it was kind of cool, and I made good money back then. I mean, back in '75, I'm knocking down $900 a week. And back then, my rent was only $65 a month. And then usually $35 for groceries, and I had a beater car that I paid $300 for or something like that, and it was kind of fun back then. I mean, it's just running back and forth, doing 3 loads a day, I only worked 5 days, but those 5 days I put a lot of hours in. And back then, since I was a city driver, we didn't have logs. We didn't have logs at all. We had like I don't remember I think we had a punch card that we punched in when we started. And we'd come back, we punched up, but we weren't paid on the hour. We were percentage. I don't know if that was, but it was before, we never ran logs because we were just intra-state, which means that you only drive in the state. So, but 3 loads a day. But the thing of it is back then didn't have all these computerized stuff on the motors. As a matter of fact, to start my truck in the wintertime, we had it plugged in. You had a valve underneath there for that 290 coming. So when you're in the truck, you had to pull this valve out, and what it was is a compression release. It would open up the valves. So the engine would start spinning fast, and then you would push it back in, and then the motor would start, you'd hear, all of a sudden, it would spin fast, and then when you let that in, you'd hear go, and then it would start, and then smoke like hell, but that's how they started back then, not like now. Now you just hit the key, some people just put it in drive and go. Back in those days, it wasn't like that. It was, you were a trucker back then, you were just, you had a lot of stuff to do. And for safety, nowadays you have maxi brakes, and if you're a trucker, you know what maxi brakes are. It's a spring-loaded, on each one here, except for the steering, you have a cylinder, and there's a diaphragm, and there's a spring in there. When you stop, the air pressure pushes the diaphragm, and that puts the brakes on. But when you remove pressure from it, what happens is then that spring pushes and sets the brakes. But back in the 70s, they didn't have those. They had an air tank on your tractor and your trailer, and it fed that. So if you had an air leak on that tank, what would happen is when you were in that docket and you'd run out of air, theoretically your truck could roll. But usually those docks were pretty steep, so we never rolled. But sometimes you'd feel it when you'd bring that coil out and be setting it down on a truck, you'd see your truck roll a little bit, you know what I mean? And you knew that tank was out of air. So a lot of times after you chained it down, or if he said you got to pull outside, you'd start the truck and just, without even releasing the brakes, you could actually just drive out of the building because you wouldn't have no brakes. Now there's a whole different animal now. I mean, there's a computer on the truck I'm driving right now. It monitors every single thing. Heat, brakes, everything. Everything is on a computer. So, but it was fun. I mean, it was a challenge, and at that time you'd get big bazookas only because that manual steering and shifting and stuff like that. And then, of course, you had to tie those chains down, and usually you had to put 3 chains on a coil, 43,000 pounds, because especially going to Elk Grove Village back then, and I don't know if they're that way now because I don't go that way anymore, but back then when you'd be going through Bensonville, the local cops always stopped you. They were always stopping you and checking you. Then if you had a lot of weight, and when you're hauling percentage, you always had as much weight as you can carry without being over that 72,000 pounds. See, back then, if your trailer was only 32 feet long, you were grandfathered in as 72,000 gross, not 73,280. And then later on, it got 80,000. But back then, for me as a steel hauler, it was 72,000. But I only weighed 24,000 empty, so I can scale a lot of weight. But Bensonville, they would stop you, and then when you get in Elk Grove Village, those cops were really, really, really strict. And they knew when they would see that big coil, they knew you were going to Ryerson, because it was the main place, or Alliance Steel up on Higgins. They know that you would be loaded to your maximum. And a few times they would stop you. And a couple times I had a coil that weighed 47,000 pounds. So could you imagine the state trooper when he stopped you? Because a 47,000 pound coil, and it's one coil, and it's cold rolled steel, so it's real thick. And that thing would be huge sitting in a trailer, so I would get stopped by Elk Grove, and he'd look at that thing and go, "Dude, let me see your bill of lading." And I would give him the bill of lading. He would look on there and say, 47.5? You can't scale that. I says, I can scale it. He goes, no, you can't. He says, there's no way, the way you have that set on there, that you're not overweight. I says, dude, I've been doing this for long enough. I know. He would take me to the scale. And I would be legal. I'd be under 70, I'd be right around there, but I'd be right under 73,000, 32,000 on each, you know what I mean, on the tandems. So after him stopping me a lot of times, he would see me, and when he would stop me, he would just say, Jim, are you legal today? And I would tell him, yeah. And if I was close, I would be honest with him. I'd say, dude, I'm not really sure. I'm borderline, but I got 4 coils, so I didn't weigh it, so I'm not sure. And sometimes he would take me to scale, and sometimes, you think you're over? Nah, I don't think so. And he would let me go. I'd go to Ryerson and get that stuff out. But it was kind of fun. I mean, it's just that they were always, when they would see you, and you, after a while of going up there 3 times a day, 5 days a week, for years, they knew you. They knew you. The only time that you get somebody like a new guy, man, look at that coil, and look at that ugly white guy. He's got to be overweight. So they would stop you and take you to the scale, and then next thing you know, they're your best buddies again. But back in those days, we used the CB a lot, and we would tell. They got the portable scales up. They always had the portable scales on 159th and 294, always. I mean, it was almost like there's no way that there ain't no scales there. And you know that when you get there, there'd be a state trooper standing in the toll booth, because back then you had to pay. They didn't have the automatic drive-through. At that time, they didn't have that. So you'd be paying, there'd be a trooper standing right there. Driver, pull over in the rest area there, and I'll be there in a minute. And you'd be like, shit. And you'd see the portable scales. So you'd pull over there, and he would come over and kind of see your bills and your DOT. I don't know if I had a DOT card back then. I don't remember. But I know that he would ask for my driver's license number, and back then it was a D class, not now, it's an A class. But it was a chauffeur's license too. It would say chauffeur's license at the top. So he would check your paperwork and stuff, and since there was no logs, I didn't have to worry about that. But he would look at it and go, oh, you came from there, and where you're going, and they would ask you and then stuff. And I don't remember them asking you hours or anything like they do now. Now they want to check you out. They look on your log and say, oh, you were here at this time, you stopped at fuel at this time, and you say you're here. Wait a minute. That's 70 miles, and you only did it in 10 minutes? How's that so? Then they would really go over it with you. But back then they didn't do that. They were just mainly, all right, I want you to pull up on the scales, and they would move the scales depending on your length, and they would scale you. If you were overweight, call your dispatcher, pull over to the side there, they'll write you a ticket out, $1,500. You know, I got caught a couple times. $1,500, call your dispatcher, and I have to call V Graham. V. Yeah, Jim. I'm 159th Street. What are you doing over there? I'm going to Elk Grove. He goes, the state got you? I go, yep. He goes, how much? $1,500. So we give you a comp check for $1,500. And then the bad part of it is, when you'd get up to Elk Grove Village and you're going through Bensonville, because you'd take 290 and get off at 83 going north. And as soon as you get off right there, Bensonville's the first place you're going to go through. You gotta. And then you go down to Higgins and turn right. And always, you got two chances of getting stopped there, Bensonville and then Elk Grove. So that was kind of screwy, you know. But that's how that was. It was a terrible time for drivers. A lot of times you would be thinking, you know, you'd get right out in front of Ryerson Steel, man, there's trucks going all the way around the corner. And you're sitting there, all of a sudden here comes Elk Grove Village. And he's driving, and you see him looking at your car, and you're sitting there going, and then you hear him get out of his car. How much weight is that? 47. Come, follow me. Dude, I'm in line. I don't care. Follow me over to the scale in the Plains there. On Tui. And sometimes you were screwed. You just, it was messed up, you know, but that's how that was. I mean, it was not like now, you know. So nowadays, I'm hauling containers. Is containers better than flatbed? I believe so, because I don't have to. Back in those days, for flatbed, and I'm sure flatbed hasn't changed, when you get to the mill, like Ryerson or Inland Steel, or I used to go to Midwest Steel a lot in Portage, there'd be 20 trucks ahead of you. You'd be there for hours. And then when you'd back into the building, they would drop the coil on you, and then all the drivers, including the place, they'd be telling you, driver, pull outside and tarp and chain outside. And then they would get the next truck in and the next truck, and then all the drivers would be bitching at you if you were taking too long. It was because everybody was percentage. They wanted to get in and get out. So you had a lot of time, and this was something that you don't get paid for. There was no, all right, we're going to pay you $25 for tarping that coil, or if you got a load of plates, or you have a load of sheet metal or skidded coils or whatever it was. They don't pay you for chaining and tarping, and we had to put paper down before you tarped. If you didn't put paper on top of your load, and then you didn't put then your tarp, it would rip your tarp. So this way here with paper on top, it would rip some of the paper but not your tarp. But you don't get paid for that. So now I open the back doors back into the dock and I get loaded. Then I get to the railroad, they lift the box off or you drop the set and you're done. So containers are a lot easier. But the money between flatbed now and containers, I don't really know the rates on that stuff. I don't know if that ever got better, but always hauling flatbed was a real competitive thing to where a lot of people they were always cutting the rates. Even back in the 70s when I was doing flatbed, there was always, what's the rate today? Well, this other company, and I ain't going to name them, I don't even remember the name, but they were always cutting the rate. So when we were getting so much per hundredweight, next time I go, it'll be 10 cents shorter than that. And I go, what the hell, V? Why is that? Well, you want to work, don't you? I go, well, yeah. He goes, well, these other guys came in and said they'll run Ryerson for $1.65 a hundredweight. I don't remember the rates now, but they cut the frickin' rate. So sometimes he would ask you want to run this stuff? Well, here's what the new rate is, and it was always lower, never better. You know what I mean? So it was always that let's cut the rate shit, and that sucked. And now, 30 years later, it's the same stuff. It hasn't changed. The money's different, but your cost of fuel's different too. Back then, I don't really remember the cost of fuel because I didn't have to pay the fuel because he owned the truck, but I was on 32% or whatever it was, so I didn't have to pay the fuel. So I don't even remember what the fuel was back then. But I know it wasn't like now. If anything, it was 21 cents a gallon or 30. I don't know. I don't remember, to be honest with you, because hell, that's been 50 years ago. So anyway, so hauling containers is better than that. Now, I was hauling dry goods. Matter of fact, I was leased on the JB Hunt. I was owner-operator, leased on the JB Hunt, just tractor only, and I was hauling 360. So I know some people see these 360 loads and stuff like that. I see Dre Day said hi. I'm just going to report hi. So I leased on the JB Hunt, and I was pulling their stuff. And it was supposed to be 95%, I think they said, or 90% drop and hook. And it was kind of nice. And I started making really, really good money with that. And the way that worked is you'd have an empty trailer, 48. You would go to a place, say you go to a company A, you would drop the empty, and there would be a loaded trailer already loaded going to, say, Columbus, Ohio. So then you go in there and you sign the paperwork, hook up to that load, go to Columbus, Ohio with that load. You get to Columbus, Ohio, you would drop it at the customer, grab an empty, and then you would go to your next dispatch. So that would be your one complete trip. And when I first started doing that, the money was real good. It was like $1,200. So Chicago to Columbus, Ohio, $1,200. I thought that was good for just a one-way run. And you got to figure that's 8 hours or whatever it was, but still $1,200. Do a 10-hour, and you'd have a new empty trailer. So then you would go to your next customer, drop that empty, grab a load, and go down to Tennessee. So when I would get down to Tennessee, drop and hook, do the same thing. Make another. It would be a less amount of money. Going out of Chicago paid better. When you get to Ohio, going to Tennessee, it would be maybe $800. So then you would take a load to Tennessee, drop and hook Tennessee, call dispatch, or at that time there was a website you'd go to and you would bid. You would see the loads, and then you would grab one of the loads that you'd want. I would, after my second load, I'd want to get one going back to Chicago, or get one going in the direction of Chicago. The only bad thing about doing that is they're going to look at that as, where did you start from? Chicago. Where do you want to go? Towards Chicago. Oh, you want a backhaul. No, I want a load going back to Chicago. No, it's considered a backhaul. Okay, what does that mean? Dollar a mile. No, I don't want to haul a dollar a mile. Back in the 80s, it was $1 a mile. I says, this is 2026 or 25 at that time, or 24. $1 a mile is no good, especially when the price of diesel fuel at that time was $5. I said, I can't do $1 a mile, but so sometimes I would deadhead home because I didn't want to do the $1 a mile thing. Because I knew that they were screwing me on that because their class, it's a backhaul, Jim. It's a backhaul. You're trying to go home, so we're going to give you fuel money. What about my time? What about me? What about the wear and tear on my tires? We're getting you home, bro. And sometimes very few times I would take it, but I hated it. I didn't want to do that. So sometimes I would look for a Tennessee going to Ohio and try and get one out of Ohio going back. But that was hard because most people wanted you to get a backhaul. But what they were charging the company, their customer, wasn't a backhaul. It was, oh, you're Columbus, Ohio, and you need to ship a load to Chicago, so that's $1,200. But their broker and me want me to take it for $1 a mile or $1.25 a mile. Sometimes I could get it for $1.50, but a lot of times nobody wanted to give you that. They wanted to give you $1. So the biggest problem, and I think it's still the same, is the brokers, especially if they're brokering loads. Because they're going to say, oh, you started in Chicago, you're in Tennessee, you want to go home, that's a backhaul. Now, to me, what difference does it make what you want to call it? You're not charging your customer $1 a mile or $1.25 and keeping 25 cents out of that. You know what I mean? It's not fair to me. But the brokers, they don't care. You know why? Jim won't take that $1 a mile. But Hector will. Leon will. Tom will. Somebody will. Because it's not like we're together and we go, hey, Jim, they got a load to Chicago, but they're only paying $1. Don't take that. And then everybody, or, hey, broker, drivers, they got backhauls going to Chicago, only paying $1. Don't take it. Nobody take it. Doesn't work that way. If somebody said it pays at 90 cents a mile, I'll deadhead home. But there's some drivers out there, and I'm not trying to be racist or anything like that, they'll take that frickin' load, and they shouldn't be doing it. But they're going to look at it, well, I got to go that way. My wife called me. I got to get home. It's better than nothing. But to me, you're giving in to the system, and that sucks. So, I don't know. But now I'm doing the containers. Well, let me finish my story with JB. Sorry. So JB Hunt started this app. I'm not knocking JB Hunt because I made a lot of money with them. But JB Hunt started with this app. And it was nice because I could book a load from Chicago to Columbus because that was my favorite route. Because in the app, it would show you where there's a bunch of loads. So if I looked at Chicago to Nashville, they got 20 loads coming out. Chicago to Columbus, 100 loads coming out. Why would I go to Nashville? And then I would be able to look and say, okay, I need to go Chicago to Columbus because I know there's 100 something loads coming out. Is it what's coming out of Columbus? And then in the app, I could say, what's out of Columbus and where's it going? Columbus to Nashville, they got 30 loads. Well, hell, that's not bad. I could book one to Columbus, then book one from there to Nashville, and then on the way to Nashville, I'll figure out what I'm going to do after that. I would book the Chicago to Columbus and then book the one out of Columbus going to Nashville. And it was a beautiful thing. Rate $1,200 plus fuel surcharge. So this went on for a while, and I was making decent money, like $5,000 plus a week for 5 days. So that was working real good. And so then later on, they changed it. How you doing, Patrick? Nice to see you. So then later on, I guess they got the idea. Instead of saying it's $1,200 to Columbus, Ohio, let's get all the drivers to bid. And the bad thing about bidding is Jim says, I'll do that load for $1,200 because I know that's what I got paid before. $1,200 plus a fuel surcharge. Because at that time the fuel was $5 or $4.60 a gallon. So that was real good because your fuel cost you close to $500. So you got to remember this. This is almost a straight thing. To go 500 miles, you need 100 gallons. 100 times $5 a gallon is $500. So if you get 1,200 going out minus 500, that's what you get. So then they got into where, okay, so you bid. Jim, Chicago to Columbus bids 1,200. I don't see the other guys bidding. They don't show you their bid. All they'll show you is you lost your bid. Why? Because somebody underbid you. So then it would say there's a bid in for 1,100. And it would ask you want to do it for under 1,100? And I can put down, I'll do it for 1,000. Next thing I know, I lost the bid again. The bid was down to 900. And I'm thinking to myself, 900, it was 1,200, 3 weeks ago. That's, you know what I mean? That's a lot of money difference. So sometimes I wouldn't do it. But then you're sitting at home trying to figure out what are you going to do, and you end up taking a Columbus, Ohio for $8.50. So I figured, okay, I get out to Columbus, a lot of traffic out there. I try to get me a load going down to Nashville, because Nashville or and down in that area anyway. So I would find a load that used to be 900 going down, now there's 7. So if you think about it, I'm down already 5, and now I'm going to be down another $200 or $300. Then I get out there and, oh, you want a backhaul. Still $1 a mile. But $1 a mile is $570, and the fuel's going to cost you roughly about $400. So you gotta always, as an owner operator, there's one thing you gotta always think about. You own the truck. You might have a truck payment or whatever, but you own the truck, okay? I'm owner operator, I own the truck. And I drive my truck. It's my truck. But you've not, if you think like that, you're never gonna make it, because you gotta look at it this way here. That truck is a business. Yes, you own that truck, and it is your business, but that truck is its own business. What does that mean? If I make a check for the truck, that's, I'm just going to throw a number out, that's $5,000 for 5 days. So the truck made $5,000. So now the truck's got $5,000 and it's got to pay fuel. So now the truck's got $3,000. But now, hi, I'm Jim the driver. I need some money. So there's $3,000 left. Okay, give me a $3,000. I'm not giving you $3,000. You're my truck. I don't care. You're a driver for my truck. You're a driver. I'm going to give you driver pay. What? I'll give you $200 a day. That's $1,000. Wait a minute. You're going to make 2,000 profit and I'm only going to make 1,000? Yeah. I got $500 a month on oil change. I got a $3,000 license plate. I got a $550 tax you pay, road use tax. You got IFTA taxes. You got fuel. I got breakdown. I got tires. Steer tire, $800. Breakdown on the highway with a flat, $500. You know what I mean? So the truck can't say, I made 300 clear. I could give Jim $3,000. I mean, 3,000. I could give Jim 2,000. No, truck can't. Truck needs tax money. Truck needs all this maintenance. You can't just give it to the driver, even though, hey, dude, I own you. No, truck is a business. Truck looks at you and says, Jim, you're a driver. You're going to get driver pay. Yeah, but can't you give me $1,700? No. My expenses per week come to a certain amount of money. You got to calculate that stuff out. And then you got to say, so out of this, I'm only going to give you this because I need to keep back breakdown money. You know what I mean? For $400 a week for breakdown pay. In case because you got to figure, you drop a rear end's $5,000. Brake job, $2,500. A steer tire, $900. Bust a headlight, $20. You know what I mean? So I can't give the driver all that money. So I'll give you $1,000, and then I'm crying. I'm going home to my wife and say, I got $1,000. That's mine. Wait a minute. You're forgetting something. What's that? I got 1,000. No. Uncle Sam, he's like this. Social Security, like this. How much am I going to take home out of the 1,000? 600. So I made 600 for working 5 days. Yeah, but the truck grossed 5,000. I understand that. That truck business grossed that, but it's got all this stuff to pay. You're not taking that home. You could get 1,000 and then you take care of your taxes. And since you're getting a 1099, that means you pay double Social Security. I hope you know that. And if you break down, you don't get breakdown pay. That's for company drivers, or that's for guys who work for somebody. You as an owner-operator, you don't get that. So some people think, oh, wait a minute, what the hell is an owner-operator? Owner-operator needs to be it needs to be a couple things. An owner-operator needs to be a mechanic, number one. What? Yeah, you need to be a diesel mechanic. You need to have tools. Right now, I probably got $4,000 worth of tools I carry with me. Why? So if I break down on the highway with an airline, am I going to say, yeah, a road service, I need you to come over here and fix an airline? Sure. It's $250 for the road call, plus labor when I get there and parts. For an airline, it's just got to be cut and then put together. Yeah, about 400. So you got to do that yourself. You better know how to do that. That's how you learn to do that. Because there's a lot of little stuff. Airline brakes on your shifter. All you got to do is just take that thing off, cut it, and put a new little thing on it, and then put it back up in there and tighten it up. You need wrenches to do that. You need that little barrel fitting. You know what I mean? Maybe you need some plastic line. So you got to keep a spare. I keep all that stuff. you can't pay for everything that's going to happen to that truck. You got to do it yourself. You want to save $500? I can tell you how. Get you a jumpsuit, get you a pan, go buy yourself 14 gallons of oil, drain that old oil out, and figure out how you're going to get rid of it. Because now you can't just pour it in a sewer, because if you get caught, that's a heavy fine. And then you got to buy the filters and change your oil filters. And then learn how to change your fuel filter. Have a siphon in homes. Get you some fresh diesel out of there, pour it into your fuel separator. So you need to know how to do all that stuff. You're not going to call. You're not going to, because oil change is $500 a month. Seriously. And if you think, well, I don't need oil change every month, yes, you do. If you're running Chicago to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, daily for 5 days, that's around 3,000 miles a week. So that's 12,000 miles or under a month. You better change your freaking oil at 12,000 miles. Some people say, no, I run synthetic. I don't care if you run synthetic. You better change that oil every month. And why? Because it's $15,000 for an overhaul. That's why. So you need that oil to always be crystal clear. You need that oil to be fresh. You need to have that, make sure that that motor is staying as clean as possible inside. Because if you don't, that diesel will bust. And you better put decent oil in. Buying that oil from Pilot is $25 for their oil. I think it's a remanufactured oil. Go ahead and put that in your truck. You will get a major. So if you're going to buy some of that mobile, you're talking about the mobile oil is $35 now. Some places 32. Rotella's, same thing. A gallon. So you got a 14-liter engine, figure it out. So you got those expenses that you got to do. You just got to do it. You better have air pressure gauges because you got to air your tires and make sure that they maintain their air pressure. That's important, or you'll wear a tire out. Well, you don't want to put recaps on your tractor. You don't. Reason why is recaps blow out with heavy loads. And in heavy weather and hot weather, you will blow a recap off your truck at least once a month. A recap will cost you about $300 or $400 to buy one, if you buy one. Now, if you're out on the road and you blow a tire and you go service, that's $250. Plus you'll need a tire. That's another anywhere from $150 to $500, plus my labor, plus mileage from where my shop is to where you're at and back to my shop. A flat tire costs you $600-700 easy. And if you got those fat tires, when those fat tires blow out, it takes the rim out. So you're going to buy a tire and a rim. Those tires are expensive. So think about that. But a lot of people, they just say, well, I just want to be an owner-operator because that's cool, man. I can make the big money. You know what your big money is? Maintenance. Big money is paying out for all the stuff that you got to do to own that truck. Is it worth it? I don't want to be negative, so I'm not going to answer that. Not right now. You need to figure it out. So a lot of people, they always want to know, dude, how much can I possibly, dude, I'm so excited because I just got approved. This outfit, they're selling leased trucks. All I do is no money down. They say I can make 7,000-8,000 a week. You probably can make 6 or 7 for 7 days. And what is the requirements on those? It's easy. Stay out 3 weeks. What? Yeah, you're gone 3 weeks. JB Hunt, they want you out 14 days or something like that. Or 3 weeks, close to 3 weeks. Not that's home every week. I did that. I came home every week, but they weren't happy about that, but I didn't give a shit because it's my trucks and it's going to be my rules. But they weren't fond of that. But they needed trucks, so and I'm a good driver, and I'm always on time. And they do rate you, by the way. They rate you on your performance, and they're real strict on your performance. But I made money with them at first until they started that bidding shit. And after they started that bidding stuff, Chicago to Columbus, which was $1,200 in the beginning, it came down to around $650. I told them, I'm done. I'm not doing that. Because I know that you're charging your customer more than $1,200. I was getting that before plus fuel surcharge. And once they started that bidding shit, they stopped the fuel surcharge. But I'll bet you they still charge that customer the fuel surcharge. I'll bet you any amount of money, but can't prove it. Because if I was a broker, I'd cheat you too. Why not? Everybody else is. Why can't I cheat you? A lot of people think, well, it's a fair world. Not exactly. How you doing there? What is it? Will Curry? Nice to see you here. And Ismail, nice to see you here. Mark, I'm not paying much attention to you guys saying hi, but I'm hi everybody. If I didn't say hi, don't feel offended. I'm rattling on over here. But yeah. So you can make money. I mean, but one thing to think about the lease stuff, especially if it's no money down, and I'll give you a lease. You'll own the truck after you pay it off, and it's $70,000 or $80,000 or whatever it is. It's a 5-year lease or whatever the lease is. I don't know. But the one thing about the lease that you got to consider, because I did the lease stuff a long time ago. Hi, Ruthie. I did the lease stuff many years ago. There was a guy, he says, I'm going to give you a truck, and we got you set up on an account, and you're going to, and at that time I started hauling steel. And I'm trying to think. What it was is you paid a flat amount every week. So back then, the lease was, I think, $4.25 a week. So $4.25 a week. So he says $4.25 a week. You should make $2,000. So minus that, you're knocking out a decent amount of money. And I'm thinking, and back then everything was cheaper. So even making $1,300 or $1,400 was kind of good. So I started making good money. Then I blew a tire. The guy says, I ain't going to say his name. He says, not a problem. Tire costs $300. Okay. So come my next check, I seen the deduction, the $4.25, and I seen the deduction for the $300. So now my check is only $900. Go on. 1 week I make good. 1 week I only make $900. Because sometimes, the freight's there, sometimes it's just not, or they don't have enough, you know what I mean? So then, after a while, I blew a freaking rear end in the truck. Now, since you own the truck, that's your responsibility. So the bad thing of it is I couldn't just, out of my account, pay because I think the power divider was like $4,000. The guy says, "Okay, I'll pay it." So every week you're gonna pay $425 plus another $200 to start paying back this extra money. The bottom line is, it came Christmas time, and it got slow. Now, mind you, if you go a whole week and suppose you get sick and you don't work this week. Now, you probably know what I'm going to say, so let me say it. You owe $425 for this week, whether you drive or not. So you didn't work this week, so next week it's $850. But you only made $900. Here's your check for $50. So one Christmas, because it got slow, it was Christmas time. My last check for the Christmas holiday was $10. It was $10. I took that check home, and it almost in tears right now just thinking about that. And I walked into the house because we had to buy Christmas presents for my kids. I had 3 kids. She goes, "How much was your check?" I choked. I couldn't answer her. She's standing there looking at me. She goes, "How much was that check?" Here it is. I handed it to her. She bust out crying. She goes, "How are we going to buy our kids anything with $10? How can we possibly buy anything with a $10 check? You have to get a job. But it ain't going to help this Christmas." So my sister had bought jackets for her kids and other stuff too, because she was doing pretty good. So she gave me those jackets, and those were my Christmas presents for my kids. Could you imagine how that made me feel? But I never told my kids that at the time. But they got a Christmas present. And I hated the guy I was buying the truck from. But it wasn't really his fault. But in a sense, it really wasn't my fault because I wanted to work, but they didn't have the work. So what do? I quit. Got me a regular freaking job. And it took a long time to catch up on stuff. Because 1099s, most people fuck that up. What do you mean? They don't take out the taxes every week. You don't put that away for at the end of the year when you go to file. You need to file that shit. A lot of people don't do that. So at the end of the year, you don't have that money. But you're supposed to file taxes. Oh, you owe $3,000. How am I going to pay that? So do you want to do that? I mean, so the lease stuff, leasing a truck, be aware of that. I mean, you need to be aware of what's going to happen, or what can happen. So that lease can be good, but that lease could also, if you get lucky, don't go by. He says you're going to make $8,000 a week, because there's this one phrase that you need to learn, and you need to understand that phrase. Shit happens. You get sick. You miss 3 or 4 days or 5 days. The lease payment don't stop. Or it can be another scenario to where you broke something on the truck that's not covered underneath a warranty of any kind. There's no cheap parts on a truck. Brake job, $2,500 for the tandem. Another $500 or $600 if you want the steers. Blow an airbag, $500. Parts and labor. Drive shaft, $2,000. There's a well, that's a little high. Anyway, I'm getting a signal that this is coming to an end. But I'm looking forward to the next time we do this. So I hope the information that I gave you is useful. Love you guys, and I'll talk at you later. See ya.